Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here today. On behalf of Excelencia in Education, I welcome you to a closer look at what works for Latino college students, a discussion with our 4 examples of Excelencia for 2021. Please allow me to introduce the Excelencia team that's on the webinar today. We have co-founder and CEO of Excelencia in Education, Deborah Santiago, who will be facilitating today's conversation. My name is Adriana Rodriguez. I'm Vice President for Programs, and I'll be engaging with you in the Q&A.
Welcome, add to Adriana's welcome to all of you for joining us. We hope will be an engaging conversation. We've got just very dynamic programs and people who are committed across the country to making sure our students are served and served well. I have the good fortune of being able to serve as your kind of moderator and host for our colleagues. And I wanted to take the minute to share with you all just a little bit of context before we get into the really important work of showing what does it take and what are we doing to make sure our Latino students and our students overall in this country and each of our institutions are served and served well with intentionality. Excelencia started about 16 years ago, actually in 2005, a conversation with practitioners, people on the ground and communities across the country. We want to identify what's working for our students. And we often would find that the information we'd find at the national level and across institutions was very broad. And it didn't really focus on, was it working specifically for Latino students amongst all being served? And how did you know that it was working? And how did you find ways to show that intentionality of effort and strategy going forward? So part of what we tried to do was to make sure that we were paying attention to that. And when we didn't see it at the national level anywhere, we decided to create it. And I think that's an affinity with many of our institutional folks and communities across the country. When you don't find something that's going to add value and make a difference for what you care about, you have to create it. And I think that's what we try to do at Excelencia in creating Examples of Excelencia, which is a way of trying to identify, share, hopefully invest in, find resources for, find a community of common cause to make sure that we are serving our Latino students while we're serving all and doing so well with intentionality. So some of you who've known our work have participated and seen the Growing Works database, know of some of these practices and efforts. That's core to a community that's committed to making sure our students are served and served well to reach the goals they have, maybe even the goals they didn't even know they could aspire to. And I think where it's inspirational to talk to the 4 of our colleagues we have with us today who are committed to the kind of work that makes a powerful difference for the students they have now and continue those that they've served in the past and those are going to serve going forward. And this is in a climate where it seems like there's a perfect storm. And I don't mean that in any kind of a derogatory way, but what we're seeing is an awareness and attention to Latino students and students of color overall in a time and space where that wasn't always the case. When we started this 16 years ago, there weren't a lot of those focused on this effort and attention. And given the challenges our communities overall have faced, and disproportionately our communities of color, looking at this pandemic that has affected so many of us in such challenging ways, to see programs, practices, strategies, people who are finding ways to pivot, finding ways to adjust their efforts and strategy, whether it's hybrid or virtual, one-on-one, to make sure our students are served and served well. That's the spirit when we hear such challenging news about the economy, the environment, health, to know that there are people around the country that are committed to cause and making sure our students are served well with everything they have. That's the optimism, that's the positive efforts and otherwise challenging efforts that we need to think about today. So I share that with you as a little bit of context for the discussion we're getting ready to have now. And part of that is talking, let's talk shop with those who are committed to serving students and those that have been recognized through Examples of Excelencia for 2021. If I could ask Adriana, I think this is you're showing slides that are, there we go. I wanted to first introduce them and then we're going to engage in a dialogue because that's really what matters. These are practitioners at heart. I feel like we as a team have learned a great deal from our colleagues who are on the ground working with students day in and day out. So the four, and we're going to have an engaged conversation with Sandy Cos from Ambiciones, which was the recognized program at the associate level for 2021. Julie Carballo from Cardinal First at the baccalaureate level. Daniel Hughes, the Éxito program at the graduate level. And Carla McIntyre from Conincia Americas at the community-based organization level. These were all programs that were recognized in October of 2021 for their critical work that we know is making a powerful difference because they can show it with data and the power of knowing the students they're intending to serve. So let's turn to them and have a conversation about what they're doing with the caveat that, you know, with 50 minutes, we can only get so much done. I encourage you to follow up with our colleagues. They're just doing such powerful work. We want to bring your attention to key elements of what they're doing. If you're a practitioner and trying to figure out what you can do to better serve your students, if you're a funder, an investor that are looking for where to invest your limited resources to have a powerful impact. If you're a researcher that's trying to figure out what are the evidence-based practices that are making a difference, all of that you're going to hear from our colleagues today. So let me just start with a very pragmatic question that at the national level, we're often thinking about here. And maybe I'll start with you and thinking about, Sandy, what, if you could highlight one thing, Sandy, that your program is doing to increase Latino student success to a national audience, if you could identify one thing, what would that be?
Thank you, Deborah. Yes, I think that what we do well is that we empower our students and their families to access the college. But as you've always said, it's not just about getting them here, but it's getting them completed. So we are retaining them and then we are graduating them.
Yeah. So focusing on those outputs, right? No matter how do we know that the things are working, they're making a difference? Makes sense. Carla, from the work that you all are doing, if you could highlight just one thing, and we're going to keep going in this discussion, so we've got time to get to part of it, but if you could highlight one thing to get us started about Conincia Americas, what would you highlight?
I think for Conincia Americas, it's the way that we provide wraparound holistic coaching, and we're really intentional on providing just culturally responsive coaching with students, but also meeting the student where they're at is really important for us. Our students are going to be at different points in their educational journey, and for us, it's really being there for them throughout that whole cycle, and from summer before they start all the way until they go through their first interview. So just really meeting the student where they're at and being intentional about how we're meeting the student with the services that we provide.
Yeah. So that looks differently for different students if you're meeting them where they're at, right, Carla?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, that's a pretty labor-intensive effort. Are you seeing that come to fruition in the years that you've been investing in Conincia Americas in your work?
But yes, and I think for us, the coaches that we have right now, we have been through about 3 different school cycles, and we've seen the students grow and the benefits of, again, that personalized attention and not grouping students and saying that this is going to work for everyone, but for us to be able to meet with the student one-on-one, see where they're at, and then meeting with a different student. And it takes definitely a team of 2, but it takes a team of an organization and our partners to really make this work.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate just getting us started thinking about the diversity of efforts Sandy is doing, Carla is doing. Julie, given your work at Cardinal First, if you could highlight one thing that you think is our colleagues need to know in this webinar that's making a difference at Cardinal First, what would you share?
I would like to share that we intentionally and strategically provide community for our Latino students and their families. And we really focus on promoting sense of belonging at our institution by building relationships among them and with first-gen faculty, staff, and with the family. So we're very intentional and strategic about how we do that at all of our workshops and events.
Yeah. So appreciate that, you know, intentionality is a big word for Excelencia as well, because it shows it's not by chance, you're doing it intentionally. So can I just ask for a little more detail, and then I'll go to Daniel. And when you say provide community intentionally, what does that mean, Julie?
So our programming is done in cohorts. So students arrive to a group of 25 or 30 students at a time, all of them first-gen students. Our program is specific to first generation, but we do assigned seating at every one of our workshops. So if somebody arrives not knowing anyone, they don't feel like they are the one student that doesn't know somebody in the group. We do pre-printed adhesive name tags at every one of our workshops. We build in time for food and fellowship
at every one of the workshops. We have a faculty member at every workshop so that our students are getting connected to faculty who were also first generation college students. So just a lot of intentionality into it and making sure that there's time for food and fellowship. And we always have suggested conversation starters on the tables that are optional, but available if there's a lull in the conversation.
Thank you. That makes intentionality very concrete, Julie. Appreciate that. Daniel, given the work you all are doing, which is so impactful with Éxito, if you could share one thing that you all are doing to this group, what would you share?
It may seem like a little strange answer, but it would be identity.
Hmm.
And what I mean by that is that we provide change in identity from a student to a doctoral student, and in our particular case, researcher. In addition to that, as part of the identity, we provide mentorship, continual mentorship. And to follow up on what Julie said, you know, a lot of it is bringing them together and having a sense of identity as a large family, the Éxito family.
That's right. It makes a lot of sense. Well, you know, I wanted to be provocative in getting us started with the kind of one thing you would highlight, but I'd like to take a little bit of a step back and ask you all to kind of capture very quickly what each of your program does. Just as what is the core focus of your efforts, so that those of us who are listening in can understand what makes your program stand out and your effort and work. So take, for example, Daniel, we'll start with you, right? What does Éxito do? What is your goal as a program?
You're starting with me first this time?
Yes, this time starting with you.
You know, I think what we do is we provide examples that it can be done. Si se puede, to borrow a term from my favorite soccer team. Si se puede, in terms of showing that it can be done. You know, there's a break in the pipeline in getting Latinos to the doctoral level. And we show that it can be done. And we provide not only the identity and the mentorship, but we bring in speakers, we bring in examples. For example, one of the things that I wanted to mention is kind of a little funny maybe, but you know, provide where there's opportunities for financial aid. We have a speaker that came in and said, you know, if you have an identical twin, you may have the opportunity to get a grant as having an identical twin. So it's really providing the examples that it can be done.
Yeah, thank you, Daniel. And I want to add, because I have to remind myself too, because we're so eager to get into what you're doing, to highlight that your work is focusing on getting more Latino physicians to study cancer and Latinos in cancer. And you're doing this at a pretty high level. There's not a lot of focus on that. So I just want to make sure to bring attention to that effort.
Thank you. And it's also researchers as well, researchers and healthcare professionals, you know, to address those disparities. Thank you.
Exactly. Thank you. So Carla, you know, what does Conincia Americas do to make the case for what we've highlighted already?
So for our students, and our program's unique, is that our program is a continuation of our high school program. And so we have students that are part of a cohort-based model, and we work with them the spring semester of their senior year, along with the high school coordinators, kind of breaking it up between a team of 3. So me, the coordinator, the college coach, me, and we have another college coach as well, the student and the college coordinator. And then we work with them the summer and then throughout their first year, second year, until they graduate college. And so kind of what we do, again, is we provide that one-on-one coaching, 30-minute to an hour with students, and their services that we provide can be anything from references to mental health, as well as how to register for a class, how to apply for the FAFSA. And so again, meeting that student in that different part of the cycle. But we have 2 coaches and we serve about 100 students in our program.
Great. Thank you, Carla. About you, Julie, and the work you're doing at Cardinal First, just so that our colleagues get to know deeper and deeper the kinds of things you're doing. What's the purpose and the goal of Cardinal First?
So the mission of Cardinal First is to provide a supportive and welcoming community, as I mentioned, for our first-gen students and families, and then an intentional connection to resources, information, and opportunities for personal and academic success from a student's first day on campus through graduation and beyond. We do have student leaders in the program who are first-gen students who've already been active in the program for 1 year and then apply for those leadership positions. And our model is cohort-based monthly workshops. So we have Cardinal First Fridays for first years, Cardinal First Sophomore Suppers, Cardinal First Penultimate for juniors, and Cardinal First Home Stretch. They're 1 hour workshop time commitment for the student, but always offered at multiple times so that students can find a time that works for their schedule.
Great branding, by the way. I love that Cardinal First for each of the sections of going forward. Thank you. Sandy, last but not least, when it comes to that, just kind of an overview of the powerful work that you all are doing there.
Yeah, so our focus is providing pathways to completion for our Hispanic and Latino students. We do outreach in the 12th grade year, so start working them, help them, support them through the enrollment process, the financial aid process that we know can be, sometimes bureaucratic. We also then, once they're on campus, we become their advisor. We do programming on campus. We provide scholarships. So we have specific scholarship funds for only Ambiciones students that we award in the first year. We increase in the second year to help promote completion. And then our ultimate goal is graduation and transfer. I tell my students, we love having you here, but you gotta leave with your certificate or your degree to whatever your next step is.
That sets a powerful vision as well as services provided, right, Sandy? Which I think is so important. You back it up. It's not just that they have to have a goal, you're helping them get there, which is powerful. So thank you. So part of we have a little bit of sense of if you could highlight one thing, and we also have a little better sense of the things that you're doing concretely on the ground, in community, and at your institutions. So, at Excelencia, but also for you all, how do you know what you're doing is working is key, right? What is your evidence of effectiveness? So I guess I'll start with you, Carla. How do you know that what you're doing at Conincia Americas is making a difference for the students you're intending to serve?
I think our ultimate goal is to prepare and equip our students to get that college degree and be able to graduate, but also impact the long-term wealth of their families as immigrants or as first-generation Americans in our state. And so one way that we know our program is working is that our students are not only persisting, we're retaining them, but they're getting that college degree. And so from that data set, I think just looking at fall 2019 or fall 2020 with COVID, we had a lot of students that chose not to go to the university. And within Davidson County, which is in Nashville, about 50% of students actually went to college. And from that cohort of our students that from high school that we worked with, we had about 80% of our students that ended up enrolling. And so significantly within that county, and especially with the rates of COVID and the uncertainty, we really encourage our students to persist. And so for us, it's really that evidence of, are they getting that college degree? But also if students take a break and they need to go back, we still follow them. So it's not that we stop communicating with them. If they want to be a part of the program, even if they're not enrolled in school, we still work with them because our students will go back as long as we can provide that structure and support to be able to do that.
Yeah. I think that's so rarely part of the conversation, especially at the national level, when we're so close to looking at data. And you said something powerful, Carla, talking about your stay with them and help track them. And when they're ready to get back into the journey, you're there for them to make it happen. It's not just if they didn't make it that first time around, if they weren't ready, that's it. And that's a powerful example at a community-based organization, a place people don't often think about where Latinos are, right? And you are definitely do that in Nashville. So thank you for sharing a little bit about your metrics. You shared enrollment, persistence, completion. You talked about a service area that was very concrete and tracking. Those are all powerful ways of looking at evidence of effectiveness in strategies overall. How about you, Julie? What are you guys doing at Cardinal First that this is working for your students?
Yes, at Cardinal First, we track first to second year retention. The cohorts are generally averaging about 100 students per cohort, first to second year retention, first to third year retention, and then on to graduation. Of course, the goal is to help them achieve their goal of earning a degree. We also track engagement numbers of students that are at each workshop and then do very intrusive outreach to students who seem to have missed a workshop to make sure that they don't miss 2 consecutive ones. And then we also collect qualitative data from surveys. And we actually had a doctoral student last year do some research on sense of belonging qualitatively with the program.
Yeah, that's powerful. So looking at retention, looking at engagement. So process and outcome measures are kind of combined, and it informs your programmatic efforts semester to semester. Is that? Okay.
Yes, definitely. We encourage the students' feedback. We tell them that, we survey them a lot about their experiences, assess at the end of a workshop to see if the outcomes were achieved as well.
That's so powerful. Thank you. Sandy, of the things you all are doing there, how do you know that it's working? What evidence do you use to make the case for why it's making a difference?
Great question. So we love data here at HCC. And so we're reviewing data at the end of every semester. If they're meeting our program goals, did students get a 2.0 or above for the term? Are they in good academic standing? Are they registered to come back the following term? And so we're looking at it every semester, analyzing the data and saying, okay, who didn't meet the 2.0 GPA? We need to do an intervention now and get them set up for the spring semester. We're also looking at fiscal year data, and we're always comparing our data to non-program participants. So is what we're doing making a difference? Are we seeing better retention? We usually are. Are we seeing better, a larger percentage of our students in Ambiciones getting a 2.0 GPA compared to non-program participants? We are. So we see consistently that it's working, but also use data to make tweaks as we move on in the semesters.
Can you give me an example of how you might use some of that data to tweak your programmatic strategy, Sandy?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So I think something that we started seeing early on was students weren't coming back after the first year. And so we were able to work with our foundation to create a scholarship specifically for completion. If you have completed more than 30 credits, and your scholarship award for next year is going to be a little bigger than our first year students, because we want to support you in finishing, and we want to support you in being able to come back to the college. So that's one way we're always looking at our data and how can we switch things, or what resources can we plug in to help support our students here at HCC.
Thank you. So it's data oriented, but it's not in lieu of service, and you keep the student centered in your effort and practice. That's powerful. Thank you, Sandy. I appreciate the concrete example as well, right? So it's not just a reporting out, it's also embedding your strategies and efforts. How about you, Daniel, and the data you have? I mean, you're at the graduate level, so this isn't just about numbers. This is about how you're making a difference. So how do you show that?
The bottom line is how many got accepted? How many of our students get accepted successfully in the doctoral program? And, I don't want to say, one of the things, as I mentioned, we do is we bring identity, community, family. And I got to tell you, in a sense, we feel like we take ownership and become part of our family, and we worry about them and we try to help them. And I don't want to say this term that we want results, not excuses, but we want to encourage them and we want to help them to get to that point, because it's easy to stop. It's easy to stop. And so the bottom line for us is really how many get accepted, and to do everything we can to facilitate that. Now, we do have yearly surveys where we survey our alum.
Yeah.
And we ask the question, have you applied to doctoral school? And if you have not, how confident are you that you'll apply in the first year? How confident are you that you'll apply in 5 years? And, it's interesting to see the change sometimes that happens. Like someone will have an aha moment. So I think the way that I would describe what we do is we initially try to set the sense of community, identity, si se puede, and then try to facilitate that with constant mentorship, but then also, personal interest to make sure that they succeed in the journey.
Right. And that's really important. I know that, the focus at the graduate level, we often don't think about that as much as we're focused on access at the community college 4-year and others. And yet representation of Latinos in research and the professoriate.
And, there are other issues too. We have families and they have to take care of parents, et cetera. So it's not, I don't want to say anything's easy, but it does add another layer of difficulty to get to that spot, but it is important.
That's part of knowing who you're serving, right? So you mentioned acceptance, applications, knowing their possibilities and surveys. All of these show there's just a data-rich approach to what you're doing, which can be an added burden. There are a lot of folks that provide good programs that are, that extra dollar is going to go to a student and not necessarily to evaluation or marketing or making people aware. And I appreciate that you all have been so robust in your looking at data, not just to report out, but to inform your strategy and practice. Well, we talk about often at Examples that these programs aren't necessarily or solely for targeting and serving Latino students. But we are asked that amongst all they serve, they're paying attention and can tell us Latino students are doing as well or better than others. And as we think about that, know that sometimes there is the need at the programmatic level to balance between targeting Latino students and serving all students, and what does that mean? So maybe I'll start with you and Julie, and thinking about at Cardinal First, what are you all doing to try and balance the need as you're targeting and serving Latino students while serving all?
Sure. So as you said, our program is focused on first generation college students. And of all of our first gen students, 29% are Latino, and 67% of all our Latino students are first gen. So we make sure that our outreach materials and our communications are available in Spanish for the families that need that, as well as English. We have Cardinal First family t-shirts and Cardinal First Familia t-shirts, so family members can take whichever one they choose. We always have someone on our team that is fluent in Spanish. We do some Facebook Live events for families and caption those in both English and Spanish after the event. And we collaborate regularly with our Office of Multicultural Affairs so that we are, they see us working very closely together and intentionally.
Yeah, it's a powerful way of making sure they feel seen and included, right?
Mhm.
And you provide services to make that happen.
Yes.
Appreciate that very much. And then, you know, the ability to target and balance working with your program with working with others within an institution or with others within programs within an organization like the work you're doing, Carla. So one is to balance serving Latinos while serving all. The other is how do you balance the priority of your work and your program with others within an institution that can be prioritized. So Daniel, in the work you're doing at the health center, how are you balancing the work you're doing specifically with this Éxito program with the other work at the institution to meet goals? How do you balance that out?
You know, we have a heavy Latino Hispanic population demographics.
Mhm.
So the focus for the Health Science Center, Health San Antonio is largely that, you know, our demographics, even though we do have, you know, other groups. I will say that what we're trying to do with the program is it has been not necessarily specific for the outcome to reduce cancer-related health disparities in Latinos, but anybody that's interested in working with Latino cancer-related health disparities has been invited. And we've had several non-Latinos enter the program and do very well. Only about a half a dozen, not very many, but a few, and they've done well. One of the things we're doing, and one of the things we want to do is we've been successful, I think, but we haven't been as successful as we want. So we're doing a modeling of the predictive factors of what has been successful in our program and in our individuals. And we want to have a replicated model to apply to other institutions as well as other underrepresented groups as well. That's how we're trying to take this thing forward.
Great. Thank you, Daniel. Let me pivot and ask you, Sandy. You've got ambiciones, you've showed, you know what you're doing, what's working, you've got evidence of effectiveness. You're obviously overtly targeting Latinos, a program called Ambiciones, but you're on a campus, right? You're in a community college. How does Ambiciones, how do you all work? How do you interact with other programs on your campus to make sure to either leverage the support for your students or find ways to inform and educate others?
Yes, that's a great question. So we definitely have partnerships with the different departments here on campus. We want our students to access opportunities that they may not be aware of, such as our honors program, studying abroad, if they're able to do that, community service, stuff like that. So bringing these opportunities to our students, but then giving them a point of contact at those offices. I would say externally, our biggest support has been the school system here in Howard County. Howard County Public School System has a Hispanic Achievement Liaison Program, 5 bilingual liaisons in the 5 high schools that have the largest Latino student population. And we work very closely with them to do a handoff, presentations, working with parents, and for students and families to have a point of contact that's bilingual. You know, we give out our direct number, reach out to us, we will connect with you and help you through the process to get here and then support you once you're here. So we're definitely well known across our campus, but also I think really building that strong commitment to the community, and they feel that they can trust us and send their students to us directly.
Yeah. Have you seen a wide growth in those that are reaching out and engaging with you over the last couple of years, Sandy?
We have. So the program started in 2015, so it's still, you know, kind of young. And so what we've seen is a growth in interest. When I first started, we were looking for students, and now they're coming to us. I mean, we still do outreach, but word of mouth in our community is huge. And if their sibling or cousin or friend had a good experience, they're bringing them along. You need to join this program. So we definitely have seen a growth in interest in the program because they've seen the work that we do and the care that we have for our students.
Yeah. So appreciate also that, at Excellencia, we talk about building the confianza in the community, building that kind of trust, kind of a familial trust in community so that they know where they can go to get the support and effort they need. And I hear you when you're talking about, the kind of outreach is such that they start coming to you rather than you just always having to go find them. Carla, you all have been working, you're at a community-based organization, you're in Nashville, you're making such a positive difference. How do you interact? Because you're at a CBO, a community-based organization. How does this work connect to other parts of your program and others in the community?
I think for us, making sure that the Latino community is being able to contribute and succeed in our state is really important for us. And collaboration across sectors is also really important. We always hear that institutions, whether K through 12 or higher ed, community college and four-year private, we work in these silos. And so really our goal is to break those barriers and really help the student across all of these platforms. And so thankfully we have really good relationship with MNPS, and our other college success coach will give trainings to teachers because we can't do the work just the two of us as an organization. So it's really important to train other people on how to advise students. And so whether it be with FAFSA nights, how do you approach the FAFSA night for students who are undocumented or not eligible to file the FAFSA? And so we have a college coach that does that work to train teachers and counselors on how to do that, but also to service other students who might not be a part of our program. And on the college side for us, it's building that relationship early on, not just with admissions, but with the records office, with the counseling office, with student success, because our students are going to need all these services. And for us, it's really bringing in those teams of our top universities within our work to help students navigate that process. And so what that might look like is our students doing a tour of the university and knowing where the food pantry is or where the clinic is, knowing what does it mean to drop a class and building that relationship with that financial aid institution, because our students really need that support throughout the 4 years. I think for us, also educating teachers and counselors on helping our students in a different way. And so, for example, our students might not ask for help. They might not know how to do that. They might be afraid to do that in other situations, but it's really up to us as the practitioners to reframe that. And instead of just saying, hey, let me know if you have any questions, tell students, how do you feel about this process? What's confusing about registering for classes? How do you feel about having this case, like this course load? And really getting back to the student to empower them to ask for help and to build those relationships throughout the 4 years that they're there or beyond.
That's powerful. Thank you, Carla. And how did you guys come to that clarity that that was what you needed to be doing to make sure that you were giving voice and agency to Latino students and serving them so they could reach their goals, their educational goals?
It's really, for us, it's going to be student centered. It's always asking student, towards the end of our coaching meetings, we always ask students, like, how can I support you for you to reach your goals? And that's really important for us to ask the student what they need. We can sit here and create programs or know what works, but it's really asking the students what kind of support that they need. But of course, it's taken a long time. Our first cohort was in 2015. So it's a program that has been around for a really long time, and we're learning as we go. We also had to shift the way that we do things with COVID and really be able to flex and continue to provide the support that our students need. But really keeping it student-centered and that intentionality and personalization is really important for that student to be able to cross the finish line and get that success. And I think for us, and I want to note on that, is that we actually had a student from that first cohort that returned to us and is now a staff member and is working at the very same high school that she was a participant in. And so that's just really beautiful because other students can see themselves in her, and she can kind of help also navigate that process. And so even then, being able to recruit our own students to then come back and continue to do the work is really beautiful in our state.
That's great. Thank you. It shows the connections you continue to have in community and with others, the students themselves. It's not a one and done kind of effort, right? It's continual. Well, for our colleagues who are listening and you're hearing so much positivity, we know what works. We can have evidence of effectiveness. We're working with others. We're working in community. but there are also some challenges that are involved in trying to implement programs that are adding value, making an intentional difference for students overall. So I want to, and at Excellencia where I was very asset-based, but that's not to negate that there are challenges in the work that we do. So maybe I'll start with you, Julie, and thinking about, what are some of the challenges that you all have faced in implementing and sustaining Cardinal First?
Great question. Our program engages 400 to 500 students per year with 1.5 full-time staff members and 2 graduate assistants. So we do cohort-based programming, which we think provides a great community, but to be able to provide one-on-one support as needed is very challenging because of the numbers of students that we work with. And also to plan, we're very intentional about every minute of how we use the 1-hour workshop. And so it's very time intensive to plan the workshops, to do the outreach to ensure the students are attending one of the workshops. And then because we offer the workshops at 5 different times, every Cardinal First Friday workshop is offered 5 different times, that also becomes time intensive.
Yeah, that's quite a challenge overall in making sure that you reach students in the manner they need to. So thank you, and making sure that your programming supports that can be quite challenging. Sandy, from the powerful work you guys have been doing, what are some of the challenges that you want to share with us in implementing this and sustaining this kind of work at Ambiciones?
Yeah, great question. Kind of to piggyback off of what Julie said, our students have a lot of needs. So it's a, holistic approach. So our advising sessions are usually an hour long. So we make sure we're hitting every point that we need. Currently for this fiscal year, we're serving 115 students. However, HUC on average enrolls about 1,000 Latino students, per semester. And so we're reaching a small sliver. How can we continue to scale when we know that, this is a very labor intensive job, because our students, we need to hear what's going on. We need to, triage and follow up with them. And so, how do we continue to scale our program to serve more students, but also, finding the staffing to be able to do that and give everyone, the attention that they need. I mean, one thing we've definitely been doing is working with our partners on campus to talk about, how you can change some of your processes to help support Latino students in your different areas.
Yeah, that issue of scaling and capacity, but the need to be high touch. I can appreciate those are challenges that you guys have raised overall, having staffing that understands and gets the programming efforts. Thank you both for that overall. How about you, Daniel? Some of the challenges that you faced in implementing such a program.
Sure. I would say that I would describe our challenges in three historical events. First of all, the first few years that we were really getting up to speed, trying to understand what worked, engaging speakers and mentors. And so, it was that issue, and also, as was mentioned, resources when you're also competing with a lot of other demands. Yeah. Then the second phase was trying to push the weight forward, because with doctoral students and what we're trying to do, there is a time to event lag. So the early cohort started really producing towards the end. And then, like was said, we actually brought some of them back to be mentors for the new training. And that worked really, really well, because there's a lot of power in that. And from social cognitive theory, as many of y'all know, to see someone like yourself succeed makes you want to succeed. And again, not to play the term si se puede. But then I would say into the third phase, where we are now, is really resources. We recognize what we've done, and we want to make it better, and we want to come up with another program. And so we're looking for resources to enable us to do that while we're competing with everything else. So that's really the way I would describe it. Yeah. But as you mentioned, it is labor intensive, and there is an important element for that interaction, and that, I don't want to overplay the term familia, but there is that importance of that constant knowing that we're there for them, right, and the community engagement.
Oh, that's summarily important. Thank you. Well, I appreciate you guys being succinct. I know there are a lot of challenges. We have lots of wonderful conversations with you and looking at barriers and challenges and efforts. But I also want to make sure we're focusing on what can be done if you get an infusion of resources. So maybe I'll start with you, Carla, and thinking, if you received a new infusion of funding, we could wave a magic wand and get some new money to Conincia Americas, how would you invest those resources in your program? What would you prioritize?
For us, it really would be staffing. I think there's two layers of this. So it's staffing for us to continue to do that work so that our coaches can meet with students one-on-one and can be able to meet with them for more, but also to continue doing those trainings to those high schools and the communities. We're in Nashville, but we get calls from outside of our county. We've even gotten calls from across different states. And so really being able to staff and build that capacity would really help us to serve more students in a better way, but also for us to serve students in a more deeper way, as well as emergency funding. So our students are sometimes not able to engage in programs or events or even get that full college experience because they're taking care of siblings or they're working full time. And for us, being able to have the funding to give them an emergency $500 per student every year to just be able to relieve if they need an oil change or if something happens with rent, as well as like gas cards or food cards for that opportunity cost. I think right now we've seen that in a lot of our students, especially our students are going to commute. They're not going to live on campus. They're going to commute. So how do we kind of break that opportunity cost by providing little pockets of funding for our students to be able to enjoy coming to meeting with us, but also alleviate that stress of gas or of a rent payment or a book payment for that semester.
Yeah, that keeps it very real because our students live in that with the pragmatic in the real world. So thank you for mentioning that, Carla. How about you, Julie? If you could get a new infusion of resources, wave a magic wand, where would you choose to invest the resources from your work?
Similar in many ways to what Carla said, staff, so that we would have more staff to be able to serve students one-on-one in addition to our cohort model. So we would be reaching every student and knowing what's going on with them, even if they don't come by to check in with us in the First Gen Center. So we could more preventatively address some of the barriers that they're experiencing. I also would love to have a staff member who could mentor our students through their first 2 years after graduation, because we know they're first gen when they enter the professional world, and that students could really benefit from mentoring. We do that a little bit organically right now, but to have someone that can help mentor our new professionals during their first 2 years after graduation. I would like to engage our families a little bit more, which we could do if we had more staff, even more than we do now, for greater impact in the community. And we have seen a big increase in high schools and junior highs in the area wanting to bring students to campus with their guidance counselors or their teachers. And we are doing that. We have special first gen visit days. But last year we did have some funding and we were able to do some virtual panels with our current first gen students speaking at their local high schools and junior highs. And that was very impactful for both the high school and junior high students, as well as our students. And then of course, as Carla said, emergency funding, we're seeing students or bigger scholarships. So students weren't having to work so many hours and could get some of the benefit of the other opportunities in college.
Right. Thank you. And it's impactful, so much impact that you've had, and you know that what you're doing works, the ability to serve more. And it's impressive. You all are relatively small staffed, I think 2-3 FTEs and others, and yet you're serving 400, 200 students overall and having the kind of impact that you show with your data overall. I also want to make sure that we focus on kind of because we have a national audience who's listening to us here, elements of your program that you think can be replicated elsewhere. So I'll start with you, Daniel. What are the kinds of things that you're doing at Exito that you think others can either replicate or scale as they look to better serve their students?
Thank you for that question, because I really want to answer it. And I want to tie it into the magic wand question. Good. And I'm not going to post my routing number, but I can do that if need be. I think the best answer I can give you is we look retrospectively over the last 10 years, and we learned a lot of what we did well and what we didn't do so well. We did very well. So I would say that, the thing that we need to do is to get it out, is understand what we did well in this prediction model that I mentioned to you, and come up with a replicated model, because a lot of the things that we do can be replicated not only with other Hispanic serving institutions, but also underrepresented groups in terms of what I call a cultural congruence, cultural competence, cultural congruence, where, again, as I mentioned, when you bring people back that have succeeded and you have this cultural congruity, it's really very reinforcing. But it doesn't just apply to us Latinos, it applies to all groups. So I think those things that we learn on how to do that well, we can take those and do a replicated model for other groups as well. And that's what we would do if we got funding.
Great.
That's
Thank
exactly what we would do.
Oh, that 2 for 1. I get it. That makes a lot of sense. Sandy, from your perspective, given what you're doing at Ambiciones, I mean, you all have mentioned this is very head and heart driven. It's very labor intensive. It's high touch to have an impact. Are there things you're doing at Ambiciones that you think can be replicated elsewhere?
Yeah, I think, when you're looking at staffing, being intentional in your hiring, right? So our staff for the Ambiciones program, we're first-gen college graduates. We are bilingual. And so our students see themselves in us and they're able to communicate with us in whatever language they're comfortable, and their families too. So I think being really intentional in your staffing, and I think has been the biggest, key of success for our program. We understand where our students are coming from. And so we plan and we program with that in mind. I think the other piece is really developing that trust with the community. I think that sometimes we want to get a quick ROI, right? A return on investment, but we have to be out there in the community presenting. Students and families will constantly see our face, know our names, have our contact information, that they'll, build that trust with us and send their students to us, take advantage of the opportunities we're offering here at the college. So really, sometimes you can't quantify that right away, but if you build it, they will come. And if they see that they have someone they can trust on your campus, especially even with our undocumented student population, like they know that we're a point of contact, that they can share information with us and we'll figure it out with them.
Great, thank you. Carla, is there something you're doing? I mean, Conincia Americas seems like it's so unique in so many ways, but are there things that you're doing that you think other community-based organizations can replicate and scale up?
I think the need for that deeper collaboration across that K through 12 universities and CBOs is so important. And for us, we not only partner with those, but we partner with other community-based organizations as well, because it's not kind of, oh, that's kind of my piece of the pie, I'm not sharing. We all keep it together to really serve our students. And so for us, that's something that's scalable. Get to know your communities. Who are the organizations that are helping Latino and documented students? Also, what are the nonprofits that are being able to process DACA applications? Because all those things are really important. Because again, for us, it's that, where is the student at in their cycle? Is their DACA application not being renewed? Is that going to prevent them from returning? In Tennessee, we're a state that does not offer in-state tuition. So we have to be creative on how we kind of support students to be able to go and get their college degree. And so that deeper collaboration is so important, but also that holistic inventory. So asking students, how are you? Do you have food? Do you have shelter? Do you have water? How can I help you with that? How are you with your well-being? How committed are you to graduating and getting your college degree? Where do you feel professionally that you are to be able to get that major? And I think the answer for a freshman on their professional development is going to be a lot different than the answer for a senior. And we know that for our students, that first hurdle is getting into college and continuing, but that second big one is going to be getting that first job. Are they going to be able to get a job that creates them wealth, and they're going to be able to transition into that young professional life? And it's, again, those collaborations and those deeper connections with organizations is going to be really important to help them get across the finish line. And hopefully maybe they'll return to us and be able to be on staff to help future generations. And so
Like that
really
kind of cycle, the cyclical, right, Carla? That's great. I so appreciate that. And I wondered, Nick, you talk about the holistic inventory, like, are there tools or specific kinds of questions? But I imagine that Sandy and Carla and Julie and Daniel, that you've got some things that, still take people to implement, but there might be some resources and tools for people to consider, right? Well, I would love to talk to all of you much longer. I know we've just scratched the surface on the value and the depth of the work that you're doing, but I also know we've had a very active, I can't read, I'm not reading the comments of the Q&A, but I want to make sure that Adriana is able to do that and see if there are questions for our colleagues to dig a little bit deeper as we think about this work, and hope that you'll stick with us and go to the Growing Works database, be in touch with these colleagues because they're doing powerful work. Adriana?
Yeah, Deborah, we do. We have a rich Q&A going. And so some of this, we won't have time for all of them, but one I think that people could perhaps share out a bit is, what are tools or any electronic data system that you're using for your data collection efforts to measure your impact?
Oh, interesting.
Anyone
Julie or Sandy, I know that you guys had mentioned explicitly some of your stuff for retention. or
So
others?
we work closely with our prod office, which does all of our research data in business objects. But we also, I did see an early alert mentioned there. We actually just transitioned to CRM Advise. And so because our students are in a cohort, we as their advisors get to track if they're getting any alerts from faculties or anything related to their grades and the terms, so we're able to do interventions. So we've been very critical in developing that tool to build it in a way that it will help us support our cohort students at the college, and with the early alert tool as well.
Great. Okay. Others, or shall we move on to another question? I know this, it's so hard, we have limited time, but I want to make sure. So I heard that working with the institution and others. Adriana, do you want to give us another question?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's several that have been asking about, pivoting during the pandemic and maintaining retention and what plans you might have for returns. I know some of you are on campus, some are returning, and what does that look like as you continue your effort?
So the pandemic, how you've pivoted and how you've been able to address. It seems like when they mention retention, makes a perfect case for the kind of things you're doing. Julie, do you want to respond to that one?
Sure. So during COVID, we purchased a Cardinal First tent and did all of our programming outside on the lawn when weather permitted. We were in the Chicagoland area, so that didn't happen year round. Last year, everything was offered both virtually and in person as that was available. We came up with some extra programming. We did some Facebook Live events to keep students engaged as well. So very intentional engagement. We actually did one-on-ones with all the first years, 3-on-1s with all the sophomores to try to keep students connected and see how they're doing. And one of the things that we've started since COVID is when they RSVP to any workshop to let us know which time they're attending. We ask what's one thing going well for you right now, so growth mindset, and what's one challenge you're facing right now. And then we're able to look at if we need to build something else into the workshop. And we ask, how can we assist you at this time? So because we have 100 students in each cohort, that's a way for us to very quickly get a finger on the pulse of who needs a follow-up and what are some challenges that if several students are reporting the same thing, then we can go and work with that office at the institution to help with that.
That's just another example of data that's using to inform it, and you pivot your programming, but keep your overall purpose and goal consistent. Great, thanks. Adriana, any other questions?
Oh, I'm so torn, but I want to jump in. Someone posed a question: what tips, advice would you give to faculty members to employ inside the classroom that would support your efforts?
You're right, these are good questions. Anybody want to tackle that one?
I'll jump in a little bit. I think if I were to ask faculty members what they could say to support the students is, give them encouragement, give them the positive half of it. Don't talk about the barriers, but talk about how you can overcome the barriers and try to build what we call the barrier self-efficacy, their confidence to overcome the barriers, because there's going to be barriers, more so than we probably suspect personally. That would be my advice.
Okay.
And I'll jump in here, Deborah. One of the things we ask our faculty to do is to share bumps in the road, hurdles that they experienced while they were in undergraduate. When they come to our events and talk, I ask them not to share about their research or expertise. I ask them to share what did not go well as an undergraduate and how you worked through it. So we talk about that a lot. And we also ask them to encourage question asking and help seeking. So if a student comes with a question, even though they feel they clearly explained it in class, to say, I'm glad you asked that question. And so that we're really encouraging students to ask questions and to seek help, and we're reinforcing that behavior.
That's great, thank you. Two very good examples. Adriana, any other questions you want to raise?
Yeah, I think as folks have shared about being able to intentionally serve Latino students and their families, you want to share some more about how you guys do the promotion, how you do some of the outreach in a way that's engaging with the whole community, and what kind of efforts do your students do in the community itself?
Interesting. Carla or Sandy, something that you're doing that's overt in that space? Because you both work with families too, right? It's not just students.
Yeah, so in our work with the high school liaisons, they host family nights, and we do presentations for both the family and the student about, the process of enrolling to HCC, what they need to know, and as a point of contact. In the sense of community service, I actually just got approached by a middle school to say, can we kind of maybe create some type of mentorship program with your students that are at the college, because of the pandemic, our students haven't interacted, outside these walls. And so, how can we do that? So always, being intentional in our outreach, giving our students opportunities to grow their leadership skills, their public speaking skills and stuff like that. So I think connecting with the community so our students can see themselves, our middle school students can see themselves within students that are at the college right now.
It's powerful. Carla?
Yeah, and I think for Conincia Americas, we have education programs that start all the way from pre-K. And so we have a Padre Comprometidos, which really kind of helps parents kind of understand that process. And so we have some parents whose children end up being in our program, but we're also doing presentations and collaborations with them as well. Also really important as we kind of work with students is that we ask them who is involved in their educational attainment journey. Sometimes our students might be here on their own. So we never want to assume that they do have parents at home. It might be an older sibling or they might be with an aunt or uncle. So really kind of empowering that student, but also educating parents earlier on. So we do offer kind of tax preparation services. So if we do have students who are eligible for financial aid, we kind of connect them with our tax preparation person that junior year. That's kind of when that FAFSA is important for them to be able to get financial aid. And so it's really utilizing the services that we offer here at Conincia Americas across all the boards to be able to really engage with parents or whoever's involved in that student's life really early on.
Thank you. So critical, all of you talked about, knowing who you're serving, knowing community, bringing in other resources, approaching it in a holistic way, and leveraging what you can to make sure that your students and their goals and aspirations are served well. So thank you all for taking the time and sharing that. I know it's just a drop in the bucket to the critical work you're doing. I hope we can continue to bring attention to the kinds of things you're doing, why they matter, and the kind of commitment and leadership you're showing as individuals, but also your programs to make a powerful difference. That's core to making sure we're serving our community well. So thank you all for that. I want to be respectful of time and hand it back to you, Adriana.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. What a wonderful discussion. I know there's so many questions. We're sorry we can't get to everybody, but we will take note and make sure we can incorporate some of it in our follow-up to you all with the recording. We want to also invite you to learn more about the programs, as Deborah has mentioned, with our Growing What Works database. Their contact information is there, as well as other programs. We got some questions about the associate level, graduate level programs. So we invite you to share, to access that information there. So they're dropping the link in the chat for the Growing What Works database. And as well as our microsite where the Examples of Excelencia information lives. There's ways for you to look at the role of metrics, how to tell a compelling story. There's a lot of information there, which leads me to, we will be kicking off the 2022 cycle in just a little under 3 weeks. So I'm gonna see if I can finally get this technology to work for me today and share with you some key dates. Can you guys now see the slides without my notes? Okay. So we have the call for nominations opening February 1st, as well as profile submissions. Nominations will close on March 4th. We'll also have a webinar in the week of March 7th for those who are submitting for the first time and want to know more about how you share your story with Excelencia. Those profile submissions will be due April 1 and all towards our culminating event in September, Celebración de Excelencia, which will share the 4 examples, just like our fine folks here that shared their story. Also, we cannot leave today without thanking those who support Examples of Excelencia, in particular, our Latino Student Success Champions of Bank of America, Google, JP Morgan Chase, the Lumina Foundation, the Strata Education Network, and Wells Fargo. So we thank them for their financial investment in support of the 2021 cycle. And they joined these several others who, again, are investing in the Examples of Excelencia. We thank you all for being here today and joining us in such an important conversation on what works and what's having an impact. And we are just over the mark, so we want to wish you guys a wonderful day and thank you so much. Examples@excelencia.org will get you to our team to answer any additional questions you may have. Enjoy your day.